Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I am still in my living room and it's Shabbat. We had a good Shabbat rest and it's time for me to share with you the portion of Matot. It's toward the end of the book of Numbers, chapter 30, verse 2 to chapter 32, to the end, verse 42. We are in one of the most difficult portions of the Torah that is studied all over the world today. The difficulty of that portion is that for the first time and the only time in the Bible, we have God commanding the children of Israel to take vengeance over the Midianites. The words in Hebrew are nakom tinkom. You will take vengeance. And I will read it to you in English from chapter 31 of the book of Numbers. Verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take vengeance on the Midianites for the children of Israel. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people. In other words, you cannot die until you take vengeance over the Midianites. You know, the Torah in Leviticus chapter 19 has a command, lo tikom velo titor, you will not take vengeance and you will not hold a grudge over anyone. And we know that when the children of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, took vengeance over the rape of their sister Dinah over the people of the city of Shechem, they were condemned. Jacob condemned them and cursed them, and that's one of the reasons that the tribe of Levi did not inherit any land. They had to be dependent on the charity, on the tithes of the rest of the tribes. And their portion of the land was given to Joseph's two sons. So we are commanded not to take vengeance by the Torah, and then God tells Moses, take vengeance over the Midianites. Not simple vengeance. It sounds like the type of vengeance that Daesh, ISIS, is taking in all the killings and all the pillage and all the young women that they take and they marry off to people. Sounds terrible. The command in chapter 31 of the book of Numbers sounds terrible. But children of Israel actually don't do it. They kill the men, the fighting men. They leave the rest. So God comes to Moses and says, listen, okay, I understand you. Okay, you can kill the men. You can kill all the women that were not virgins, but keep the virgins. And you can purify all the metals, the gold, the silver, the copper, the bronze, the tin, by fire. You can purify the metals by fire, but you can still keep the virgins. It's a kind of concession. It's not like the first command that God gave to Moses, but God saw that the children of Israel were merciful. They didn't want to kill everybody. And then again, he makes them a concession. It's still a very difficult story. But we need to understand why this unique case in the whole Torah, in the whole Bible, where vengeance is condemned by the book of Proverbs and other places. This unique place, God commands the children of Israel to take vengeance. Why? Because the case with the Midianites was unique. See, Balaam, the same Balaam that remains the arch enemy of God's people, from the book of Numbers all the way to the book of Revelation, Balaam remains the arch enemy of God's people. Why? Because he could hear God. He talked to God. If you go back to the book of Numbers, you can see chapter 21, and Balaam talked to God, and he heard God, and he knew what God meant. And yet he advised Balak for the gain of money how to make the children of Israel stumble. By sending their beautiful women to entice the men of Israel. And just 2 parashiot earlier, we read about Zimri, the son of Palu, and Cosbi, the princess of Midian, the daughter of the king of Midian, who had sex in front of the tabernacle itself. We see that, and then Pinchas, who now leads the army of Israel, same old Pinchas, who leads the army of Israel, he's now the man that actually killed Zimri and Cosbi with his spear right in front of the tabernacle. A very unique case, one case in the whole Bible in which God commands the children of Israel to take vengeance over their enemy. But I don't want to concentrate only on that case of the Parasha. Parasha has other important things. I do want to talk about the first part of the Parasha of chapter 30 that deals with making promises, making vows, making agreements, contracts, taking oaths. The Torah speaks here and says, if a man takes an oath or swears or makes a vow, that oath, that vow, that promise binds him. He is bound by his own mouth, by his own word. And for a man, there is no one who can release him. He is bound by that oath. For a woman that is not married, a girl that makes an oath or takes a vow or makes a promise, her father, if he learns about her vow on the same day, he can annul the vow. On the same, if he hears about it and he doesn't annul, she is bound to keep her vow, to keep her promise, to keep her oath that she took. A wife, her husband is her authority. She is submitted to him. And so she has the possibility of her husband on the same day, like a father of a young girl, to annul her vow or her oath. Women are better off than men in this case. I wish that men had that right too, that somebody could annul their vows and their oaths. But there isn't. Now we live in a world in which equality of the sexes is celebrated. It's so celebrated that it has koshered some of the most odious sins in the Torah and in the New Testament. sins that are called abominations. The origin of a lot of our problems in the modern world today is the French Revolution that promised freedom, equality, and fraternity to all. And these are wonderful promises, and they're very important on the political level. They're very important on the economical level. But in reality, it's a promise that is leading toward some of the most biggest abuses of freedom, the biggest abuses of fraternity, and the biggest abuses of equality. Yes, I'm against women getting less pay for their work than men do. I'm against privileges that women have that men don't have in most of the world, like maternity leave. I'm against inequality. I'm for equality on economic and political level, and I'm happy that finally in the United States a woman was nominated to run for president. I'm not sure, whether I'll be happy if she wins or not wins, or the other guy wins or not wins, but at least they got to the place that Israel was the first country in the world in the 1960s that Golda Meir was our prime minister. It was the first in the world. So it was something good. I'm for women in politics doing everything that men can do, and they can be like Annie Oakley that sang, "What you can do, I can do better." Sometimes that's true. There are things that women can do better. But blind equality for the equality's sake, and not because of merit, and not because of success, and not because of morality, is not a good thing. We see in the Torah that women have privilege here that the men don't have. The men don't have that privilege for somebody to annul their vow. Women have their father or their husband that can annul their vow, their oath that they take. But I want to go to Yeshua, to the New Testament, to the Sermon on the Mountain, to Matthew chapter 5, and see what Yeshua does with this command. I'm going to read from the Gospel of Matthew, from chapter 5, from verse 33 to 37. The words of Yeshua. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oath to the Lord." It's a quotation from our Parasha. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your yes be yes, and your no, no, for whatever is more than this is from the evil one. What does that mean? Yeshua, in this case, is acting like a rabbi, a typical Pharisee rabbi. One of the main things that the Pharisee rabbis did in the 1st century and 2nd century up to the 4th, 5th century was build fences around the commandments of the Torah. In other words, they want to keep the person as far from possibility of sinning as possible. So they build a fence around it. Sometimes the fence is too much. Sometimes the fence is too high. Sometimes the fence is too heavy, and it's not any better than the commandment of the Torah. But in this case, Yeshua is building a fence. He says, okay, yes, the Torah says that if you take an oath, if you take a vow, you must keep it. Clear. Yes, it's true. If you take an oath, you must keep it. However, it's much better for you not to take an oath at all. Because when is an oath required? When does the Torah require an oath? When people doubt your word. When people are not sure that you are going to keep your promise. When people want to make sure that there will be something, an additional guarantee that you are going to do what you said you're going to do. That's when they want you to take an oath. Or in court, when they want to make sure that you're going to speak the truth as a witness, you have to take an oath. Normally, under normal circumstances, a person who has a good reputation, a person who is not a criminal, a person who is trustworthy and has a record of being trustworthy, he has a good credit record, doesn't have to take an oath. People believe him. He can walk to a store in town where he's well known because he grew up there, not to one store, to 10 stores downtown, and say, listen, I'm in a bit of a squeeze over here. I need $5,000. I'll give it back to you tomorrow. If they trust him, they give him $5,000 cash. That's it. The next day, he keeps his word. He brings it back to them. But however, if he doesn't have a good reputation, and his yes is not yes, and his no is not no, nobody's going to give him. They'll want him to sign an agreement, and they will want, paperwork and taking an oath, and yes. Yeshua is saying, live your life like that your yes is yes, your no is no. When you say something to somebody, they trust you. They trust you enough that you don't have to take an oath or a vow. Yeah. That's what Yeshua is doing. He's building a fence like a typical Pharisaic rabbi around the mitzvah of the Torah. He says, the Torah requires, and of all they require, that you take an oath, you take make a vow. But if you live a proper godly life, your word is your bond. You don't have to take an oath. You don't have to swear. You don't have to take a vow, because the people will know this man speaks the truth. If he promises, he keeps his word. That is very fine, very good, what Yeshua says. Now, what is he embellishing here in this case? Not to swear by God, or by God's throne, or by heaven, or by Jerusalem, or by your own hair. Because essentially, what are you saying? By heavens, I swear by heaven. By God, by God, I do. By Jesus, I do this. I will do it. What, you have any influence on God? If you didn't keep your word, you can pay with God. What? You can pay with the gold of the temple. You can pay with the hair on your head. What good is it going to do if you don't keep your word to begin with? Now that brings us to a difficulty, another difficulty, and that is that people in the New Testament still took oaths. Disciples of Yeshua still took oaths. the most famous of all, took a vow, not an oath, more stringent than an oath, a vow. A vow is a self-curse. Essentially, to take a vow, it says, if I don't do what I'm promising, then my punishment will be pam, pam, pam. That's a vow. And find out that the Apostle Paul took a vow. When he was in Synchrea, he took a vow. His vow was, I will grow no hair on my head until I go to Jerusalem for the feast and celebrate the feast. He's talking about the feast of Pentecost, Shavuot. The feast of Shavuot is the feast of the first fruit, and Paul wanted to get to Jerusalem with his 7 Gentile disciples and the money that he collected from the churches in Asia Minor and in Greece, and bring it to Jerusalem and give it in the temple as a sign of his harvest among the Gentiles. That's what the Apostle Paul wanted to do. We read about it in chapter 18 of the book of Acts. I'm not going to read all of it, but I will read verse 18 to 21. So Paul still remained a good while. Then he took leave of the brethren and sailed for Syria. And Priscilla and Aquila were with him. He had his hair cut off at Synchrea. Synchrea is the naval port of Corinth, right next to Corinth. He had his hair cut off in Synchrea, and he had taken a vow. That's verse 18. And he came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself entered the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they had asked him to stay a longer time with them, he did not consent. But he took leave of them, saying, I must by all means keep this coming feast in Jerusalem. But I will return again to you, God willing. And he sailed from Ephesus. So Paul was in Greece, next to Corinth. He had disciples in Corinth. He had been there for quite a while. And he decides to take a ship that will take him to Syria. And he stops in Ephesus, which is the normal route from Synchrea towards Syria. From Synchrea to Syria, you have to stop in Ephesus, and then from Ephesus to Rhodes, and from Rhodes around the coast of southern coast of Turkey. Sorry for the weak connection. For some reason, my internet was connected weak, and it cut off a little bit. I apologize. I had nothing to do with it myself. Okay, so he was sailing to Syria, and from there to Jerusalem, he stopped in Ptolemais, which is modern Akko, north of Haifa. And then from Akko to Jaffa, there he met Agabus, and Agabus told him, don't go to Jerusalem, you'll be tied up and put in jail. He took his belt and he tied him with his belt and had this whole drama connected to his prophecy. Yeah. So Paul said to Agabus in chapter 20 of the book of Acts, even if I die in Jerusalem, I have to go. Why? Because he took a vow to go to Jerusalem for the feast of Shavuot and bring those first fruit of his to Jerusalem. He took a vow. And as one who has taken a vow, as one who knows the Torah, says, I have to go to Jerusalem, even they kill me. I will go to Jerusalem, because there is nobody to release his vow. So how can we explain it? Yeshua didn't say, don't take a vow if you have to. He said, it's better for you not to take a vow. Don't take a vow. Say yes, yes, no, no. That's defense. But the Torah permits to take a vow with all the gravity of having to keep your vow. Paul knew that gravity, and that's why he said, I will take a trip to Jerusalem by all means. That's the text in the book of Acts. Now, some of you are going to go to the book of Acts in chapter 18 and look for that verse in verse 21, and you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it in the NIV. You're not going to find it in other versions as well. You'll find it in the King James. In the King James, New King James, you'll find it. But not in the other more modern translations. Why? Because the people who translated it were Protestants. And it didn't fit Protestant theology. For Protestants, Paul was against the Torah, against the commandments of the Torah, against the holidays of the Torah. They didn't pay attention to the context of Galatians 4, 8 through 10. They didn't pay attention. He's talking to the Gentiles. They thought he's talking to everybody. So he says, you make me worry that you're keeping holidays and new moons and so forth. Maybe my work was in vain. He wasn't talking to the Jews there at all. He was talking to the Gentiles, keeping the Roman Gentile holidays. That's what he was doing. Paul didn't break the Torah even one time, because several times he said, I did everything according to the Torah. And in Philippians chapter 3, he says, according to the Torah, I walk blameless, which means I keep the Torah to every detail of it. That's not the Paul that is presented by most Protestant and Catholic and Greek Orthodox preaching. But that's the Paul of the New Testament. But back to our portion of Matot in the book of Numbers. In the last chapter, we see, chapter 32 of the book of Numbers, we see another very interesting attitude of the Lord, of God. 3 tribes want to stay on the other side of Jordan and not come into the land of Canaan, the promised land. The other side of the Jordan was not promised. But 3 tribes said, we have flocks, we like it here, well, let us stay here. And Moses doesn't know what to do. He takes it up with the Lord. You know what the Lord says? If they keep their obligation, their collective obligation to the rest of their brothers and sisters, to the rest of Israel, welcome. They can do it. But they have to fight together with everybody else to take the land of Canaan, to divide the land to its proper tribes, and then Reuben and half of Manasseh and Gad can stay on the other side of the Jordan. They like it here. It's good pasture land for them. Let them stay. Again, we see how God, the God who created the heavens and the earth, hears the prayers and the desires of his children, as long as they're reasonable. This is something that we need to take deep into our heart, because sometimes we fail. And when we fail, it's easy to get depressed. It's easy to get, feel that the sky is falling on us, that we have no more hope. But look at our God, how he loves us in the Torah, how gracious, long-suffering, and loving, full of loving kindness he is toward us. That he says, look, okay, I'll give you a concession. You want to stay. Keep your obligations to your brothers and your sisters. then you can come back to the land that you like on the other side of the Jordan. It's okay. You can do it. The same thing was in chapter 31. Said you didn't want to kill everybody of the Midianites. Okay, you can keep the virgins that were not a part. Why the virgins and not the other women? Because the other women were suspect that they participated in that advice of enticing the men of Israel with their sexual abilities, with their sexual prowess. And so they're not virgins. So they participated, probably might have participated in this horrible event that Bil'am advised them. God is an understanding God, a loving God, a God full of kindness and love, and that's why He sent His only begotten Son, for us to be saved and have our sins forgiven, and to show us His patience and His grace and His mercy when we do everything we can to please Him. May God bless you all. I'm sorry about the weak connection in my house today. I will check it, and I will be back next week, God willing. I will do the same with the last Parasha, last portion of the Torah of the book of Numbers, Parashat Masa'eh. God be with you and give all of you a good week. Amen.